Last Tuesday evening, my wife dropped a bombshell that would change everything between us. I was grilling burgers in our backyard when she approached with that look, you know the one, where someone's rehearsed what they're about to say. Honey, I've been thinking about us, about our relationship, and I have an idea that could really strengthen our bond. I flipped a burger and waited. After 8 years of marriage, I learned to let her finish her thoughts completely before responding. I think we should try polyamory. Multiple partners could actually strengthen our bond. The spatula stayed frozen in my hand for exactly 3 seconds. Did she really just suggest what I think she suggested? I turned to look at her, and she was standing there with this earnest expression, like she'd just proposed we try a new restaurant. You want to explain that a little more? I asked, keeping my voice level. She launched into what sounded like a prepared speech. I've been reading about it and talking with some friends. Traditional monogamy is actually quite limiting when you think about it. When we open ourselves to loving multiple people, it doesn't diminish what we have, it enhances it. I nodded slowly, letting her continue. Think about it this way. You don't love your parents less because you also love your siblings, right? Love isn't finite. And the passion, the excitement of meeting new people, experiencing new connections, that energy could actually revitalize what we have together. She was warming up now, clearly believing her own pitch. Plus, jealousy is really just a social construct. It's possessiveness disguised as love. If we can overcome that primitive emotion, we'll grow as individuals and as a couple. Some of the most enlightened people I know practice ethical non-monogamy. I turned off the grill and gave her my full attention. So you've really thought this through? Absolutely. I mean, we're both attractive, interesting people. Why should we limit ourselves to just each other for the rest of our lives? We could explore, grow, bring new experiences back to our relationship. Here's where it got interesting. I could see she expected me to argue, to get defensive, maybe even angry. Instead, I surprised her. You know what? That's actually a fascinating perspective. Her eyes lit up. Really? Sure. I mean, if love truly isn't finite like you said, and if exploring connections with other people can enhance what we have, then why wouldn't I be open to that? She seemed pleased, but also slightly caught off guard by my enthusiasm. The more I think about it, I continued, the more sense it makes. Why should we deny ourselves experiences that could help us grow? In fact, I'm already thinking about someone who might be interested. Now her expression shifted slightly. Oh, who? Well, there's this woman at work. We'll call her the accountant. We've had some really great conversations lately, and there's definitely chemistry there. She mentioned just last week how she finds married men more interesting because they're more emotionally mature. My wife's smile became a little more forced. That's great. I'm glad you're being so open-minded about this. I have to thank you, actually. I never would have thought to explore that connection if you hadn't opened my mind to these possibilities. She's beautiful, smart, and we have this intellectual connection that's really stimulating. I could see my wife processing this information, and something in her expression suggested this conversation wasn't going exactly as she'd planned. Well, I mean, we should probably establish some ground rules first, she said quickly. Ground rules. You know, just to make sure we're both comfortable. Maybe we should approve each other's potential partners first, and perhaps limit how often we see other people. I raised an eyebrow. But wouldn't that go against the whole philosophy you just explained? About not letting possessiveness and jealousy control us. She paused. I just think we should be thoughtful about how we approach this. Of course, and I appreciate how thoughtful you've already been. It's clear you've put a lot of consideration into this before bringing it to me. That shows real maturity. I grabbed the platter of burgers and headed toward the house. I'm actually excited to tell the accountant that we're moving forward with this. She's going to be thrilled. As I walked past my wife, I noticed she didn't look nearly as thrilled as I was about her brilliant idea. The next morning over coffee, my wife had clearly spent the night refining her strategy. She approached me with a notepad, an actual written list of what she called relationship boundaries for our polyamory journey. I thought it would be helpful if we established some structure, she said, setting the notepad between us on the kitchen table. I sipped my coffee and gestured for her to continue. First, I think we should limit outside encounters to once per week maximum. That way we're still prioritizing our primary relationship. Interesting, I said. What's the reasoning behind once per week? Seems arbitrary. She shifted in her chair. Well, we don't want to get too invested in other people. This is about exploration, not replacement. But yesterday you talked about love not being finite. If that's true, wouldn't artificial limitations actually work against the natural flow of these connections? Her pen tapped against the notepad. I just think structure is important. Fair enough. What else? Second, we should have veto power over each other's choices. If one of us is uncomfortable with the other person's selection, we should respect that. I leaned back. So you're saying that after all that talk about overcoming possessiveness and jealousy, we're going to let those exact emotions dictate who the other person can connect with? It's not about jealousy. It's about mutual respect. Right. But yesterday you said jealousy was just a primitive social construct. Are we embracing primitive social constructs now, or are we growing beyond them? She stared at her list for a moment. I think you're misunderstanding the nuance here. Help me understand then. Because the accountant and I have plans to grab lunch today, and I'd hate for any primitive social constructs to interfere with my personal growth. That got her attention. You already made plans? Well, yes. You opened this door yesterday, and I've been thinking about what you said all night. About not limiting ourselves, about exploring new connections. I texted her this morning, and she was incredibly enthusiastic about the opportunity. My wife's grip tightened on her pen. Don't you think you're moving a little fast? Fast? You've obviously been thinking about this for weeks, maybe months. You talked to friends about it, did reading, came to me with a fully formed philosophy. I'm just following your lead on embracing this lifestyle. But we haven't finished discussing the boundaries yet. True. What else is on your list? She looked down at her notepad, clearly struggling. Third, no overnight stays with other partners. We should always come home to each other. That makes sense from a practical standpoint. Though I have to say, the accountant did mention she loves weekend getaways. Something about how change of scenery enhances intimate connections. But you're right, boundaries are important. Weekend getaways? My wife's voice had climbed half an octave. Oh yes, she's apparently quite adventurous. Very open-minded about exploring different experiences. Actually, she reminds me a lot of you in that way. Progressive, unafraid to challenge conventional thinking. I could see my wife processing this, and it wasn't sitting well. Fourth, she continued, her voice more strained, we should check in with each other regularly about how this is affecting our relationship. Absolutely. Communication is key. In fact, I should probably mention that the accountant and I have been having some pretty deep conversations about relationship philosophy. She's actually the one who got me thinking about how traditional monogamy might be holding people back. My wife set down her pen. She's been talking to you about our relationship? Well, not specifically about us. More about the general limitations of conventional marriage structures. She's quite insightful, actually. Very well read on alternative relationship models. How long have you two been having these conversations? A few weeks now. What? And you never mentioned them to me? I paused, coffee cup halfway to my lips. Should I have? I mean, yesterday you encouraged me to be open to new connections and experiences. These conversations have been part of my growth process. She was quiet for a long moment, staring at her list of rules. Look, I said, leaning forward. I want you to know how much I appreciate you bringing this to me. It takes courage to challenge social norms and pursue personal growth. The fact that you're willing to question everything we've been taught about love and relationships shows real intellectual maturity. Her expression softened slightly, and I promise to follow whatever guidelines we establish. Though I do hope they align with the beautiful philosophy you shared yesterday about not letting fear and possessiveness limit our potential for connection. She looked at her notepad again, then slowly closed it. Maybe we should take this one step at a time, she said quietly. Of course, whatever pace feels right for both of us. Though I should mention, the accountant is expecting an answer about lunch today. Over the next 2 weeks, I embraced my wife's polyamory philosophy with what she was starting to call excessive enthusiasm. Every few days, I'd mention another lunch, coffee meeting, or evening conversation with my new friend from accounting. How was your day? Became a loaded question in our house. Really good, actually. Had that coffee with the accountant I mentioned. We talked for 3 hours. Time just flew by. She has this fascinating perspective on how people settle for mediocrity in relationships instead of pursuing authentic connection. My wife would nod stiffly while loading the dishwasher with more force than necessary. 3 hours is quite a long coffee break, she'd say. Time flies when you're experiencing genuine intellectual stimulation. You know how it is. You must have felt the same way when you were first exploring these ideas with your friends. The beautiful irony wasn't lost on me. Every time she'd attempt to express discomfort, I'd redirect the conversation back to her own stated beliefs about growth and openness. Last Thursday, she tried a different approach. I've been thinking, maybe we should slow down a bit. Focus more on strengthening our foundation before branching out too much. I looked up from my phone, where I'd been texting. That's interesting timing. The accountant just invited me to this wine tasting event this weekend. Apparently, she knows quite a bit about Italian wines. This weekend, Saturday evening, she says these events are great for meeting like-minded people who appreciate finer things in life. Very sophisticated crowd. My wife sat down across from me. Don't you think we should spend Saturday together? We haven't had much couple time lately. You're absolutely right. We should probably start dating other people together sometimes. Double dates could be fun, though I'm not sure if the accountant is seeing anyone currently. She mentioned she's been focused on finding someone who shares her values about relationship authenticity. The color drained from my wife's face. That's not what I meant. Oh, well, what did you mean? She stared at me for a long moment. I meant just us. Together. Like we used to. But wouldn't that be regressing? You said yourself that traditional couple dynamics can become stagnant. This wine tasting sounds like exactly the kind of enriching experience that could bring new energy to our relationship. How is you going to a wine tasting with another woman going to bring energy to our relationship? Through the personal growth I'll experience, the new perspectives I'll gain, the confidence that comes from expanding my social circle. All of that makes me a more interesting partner for you. She was quiet for several minutes. Besides, I added, I'm sure you have your own opportunities coming up. Didn't you say some of your friends were interested in exploring this lifestyle too? Another long silence. Actually, she said slowly, I've been having second thoughts about some of this. Second thoughts? About which part? Just, maybe we moved too fast. Maybe we should have discussed it more thoroughly before jumping in. I set down my phone and gave her my full attention. That's funny you mentioned that, because the accountant said something similar yesterday. She did. She said a lot of people get excited about the idea of polyamory, but aren't prepared for the emotional reality of it. She thinks most couples who try it aren't actually ready for that level of honesty and openness. My wife's jaw tightened. And what did you tell her? I told her that you were the one who brought this to me, and that you'd done extensive research and soul-searching before suggesting it. I said you were probably one of the most emotionally mature people I know when it comes to relationship dynamics. You talked to her about me? Only in the context of praising your progressive thinking. She was impressed, actually. Said it takes real courage for someone to challenge their own assumptions about love and commitment. My wife stood up abruptly. I need some air. As she headed for the back door, I called after her. Should I tell the accountant you said hello? The door slammed harder than necessary. I sat there for a moment, then picked up my phone and sent a quick text. Rain check on Saturday? Something came up. The reply came back immediately. Of course. Hope everything's okay. Everything's perfect, I typed back, just giving my wife some space to process her personal growth journey. Through the kitchen window, I could see her pacing around our backyard, talking animatedly to herself. Apparently, philosophical enlightenment was more challenging than she'd anticipated. By Monday morning, my wife had clearly reached her breaking point. She cornered me in the kitchen before I'd even finished my first cup of coffee. We need to talk. I think we should stop this whole polyamory thing. I looked up from the morning news on my tablet. Stop it. What? It's not working out the way I expected. Interesting. What specifically isn't working? Because from my perspective, it's been quite enlightening. She paced across the kitchen. You're taking it too far. This isn't what I meant when I suggested we explore other connections. I'm confused. What did you mean then? I meant something more theoretical, more gradual. Not you immediately jumping into some intense relationship with your coworker. I set down my coffee. But you specifically said we shouldn't limit ourselves to just each other. You said exploring connections with other people would enhance our relationship. I'm simply following your guidance. That's not how I meant it. Then help me understand how you did mean it. She stopped pacing and faced me directly. I meant maybe we'd flirt a little. Maybe go on a casual date here and there. Nothing serious. So when you talked about love not being finite and overcoming jealousy and growing as individuals through multiple connections, you were talking about casual flirting? Her face flushed. You're twisting my words. I'm literally using your exact words. You said traditional monogamy was limiting. You said we should open ourselves to loving multiple people. You said jealousy was just a primitive social construct. I know what I said. Then explain to me how following those principles is taking things too far. She slumped into the chair across from me. Look, I made a mistake, okay? I thought I wanted this, but I don't. That's completely understandable. Personal growth often involves discovering things about ourselves we didn't expect. The accountant mentioned something similar actually. Her head snapped up. What did she say? She said most people think they want polyamory until they actually experience what it means to share someone they care about. She called it the difference between fantasy and reality. You discussed our marriage problems with her? I wouldn't call them problems. More like growing pains. And yes, we've talked about relationships quite a bit. She's very insightful about human psychology. My wife's hands clenched into fists. I want this to stop. All of it. No more dates. No more long conversations. No more wine tastings. I want us to go back to how things were. I leaned back in my chair. That's a pretty dramatic reversal. Are you sure that's what you want? Yes, I'm sure. Because last month you seemed so certain that traditional monogamy was holding us back. You had all those statistics about relationship satisfaction and personal fulfillment. I changed my mind. That's fair. People are allowed to change their minds. But I have to ask, is this change coming from a place of growth and self-awareness, or from that primitive jealousy you warned me about? She stared at me. Does it matter? Well, according to your original philosophy, it does. You said we needed to overcome possessiveness if we wanted to evolve as a couple. Stop throwing my words back at me. I'm not throwing them back. I'm trying to understand if this is a genuine philosophical shift or an emotional reaction. She stood up again, agitation clear in every movement. I don't care what kind of reaction it is. I want it to stop. Okay, but we should probably think about what this means for us going forward. What do you mean? Well, this whole experience has been pretty revealing about what we each want, what we're comfortable with, how we handle challenges to our relationship. Her voice became very quiet. What are you saying? I'm saying that someone who suggests opening a marriage and then tries to close it the moment their partner actually engages with the idea might not be someone who's thought through what they really want. It was just an idea. People are allowed to have bad ideas. Of course they are. But people are also allowed to learn things about their partners from those ideas. The kitchen fell silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. And what exactly have you learned about me? She asked. I finished my coffee and stood up. I've learned that you wanted the freedom to explore other connections without actually giving me the same freedom. I've learned that your talk about growth and evolution was really about you getting what you wanted while keeping me exactly where I was. That's not true. Then explain to me why you're panicking now that I've embraced everything you said you wanted. She opened her mouth to respond, then closed it. Take your time, I said, grabbing my keys from the counter. Think about it while I'm at work. We can continue this conversation tonight. As I headed for the door, she called after me. Are you seeing her today? I paused. We have a meeting about quarterly reports. Should I ask her to send someone else instead? The silence behind me was answer enough. That evening, I came home to find my wife sitting at the kitchen table with red eyes and a box of tissues. She'd clearly been crying for hours. We need to fix this, she said before I'd even set down my briefcase. I sat across from her. Fix what exactly? Our marriage. This whole polyamory thing was stupid. I see that now. I just want us to go back to normal. Normal meaning what? Meaning just us. No outside people. No more games. Just a regular marriage like we had before. I nodded slowly. And what makes you think that's possible? Her face crumpled slightly. Because I'm admitting I was wrong. I'm saying I made a terrible mistake and I want to fix it. That's a good start. But I think we need to dig deeper than that. What do you mean? I mean we need to talk about why you suggested this in the first place. She wiped her eyes. I told you. I thought it might strengthen our relationship. But that's not really true, is it? The room went very quiet. What are you talking about? I've had some time to think about this whole situation. About the timing, about how prepared you seemed, about the specific way you presented it. She shifted uncomfortably. I don't understand. You presented polyamory like you'd been thinking about it for months. You had articles, philosophy, conversations with friends. But you completely fell apart the moment I engaged with it seriously. So that tells me this wasn't really about us growing together. This was about you wanting permission to explore someone specific while keeping me as backup. Her face went pale. That's not true. isn't it? Because someone who genuinely wanted to open a marriage would be prepared for their partner to actually participate. Someone who just wanted to justify their own wandering, I would panic exactly like you did. She stared at the tissue in her hands. You're wrong. Am I? Then tell me about these friends you discussed this with. Give me specifics about this research you did. Long pause. And while you're thinking about that, explain to me why you immediately tried to establish rules that would limit my participation but not yours. Another pause. Actually, let me save you the trouble. I think you met someone who sparked your interest, and instead of dealing with that honestly, you decided to reframe marital exploration as some kind of enlightened philosophy. She looked up at me with tears starting again. Even if that were true, I realize now that it was wrong. I want to make it right. By going back to pretending nothing happened, by focusing on us, by working on our marriage. I leaned forward. But here's the thing. I don't want to work on a marriage with someone who tries to manipulate situations to get what they want while denying me the same opportunities. I wasn't trying to manipulate anything. You literally suggested polyamory and then tried to establish rules that would favor you. When I embraced your philosophy, you panicked and tried to shut it down. If that's not manipulation, what would you call it? She was crying harder now. I call it making a mistake. People make mistakes. You're right, people do make mistakes. But this wasn't a mistake. This was calculated. And the fact that you're sitting here trying to frame it as some innocent error tells me you still don't understand what you actually did. Then tell me what I did. You tried to have your cake and eat it too. You wanted the freedom to explore other connections while keeping me locked down and available. When that didn't work, you tried emotional manipulation to get me back in line. She sobbed into her hands. What do you want me to say? I want you to be honest. With me and with yourself. Several minutes passed while she cried. Finally, she looked up. There was someone, she whispered. I know. But nothing happened. I swear nothing physical happened. That's not really the point. Then what is the point? The point is that instead of talking to me about feeling disconnected or attracted to someone else, you concocted this elaborate philosophical justification to get what you wanted. I thought if I could make it seem like growth dash. You thought you could manipulate me into giving you permission to cheat while making it seem like my idea. She nodded miserably. And now that it backfired, you want to pretend it never happened and go back to business as usual. Yes, she whispered. I sat back in my chair. Well, at least now we're being honest. She looked up hopefully. Does that mean you'll forgive me? Can we try to fix this? I was quiet for a long moment, watching her expectant face. I appreciate the honesty, I said finally. But I don't think I can be married to someone who handles relationship problems by trying to manipulate me. Her hope crumbled. What are you saying? I'm saying this whole experience taught me something important about who you are when you don't get what you want. The next morning, my wife tried one final strategy. She'd apparently spent the entire night crafting what she probably thought was the perfect apology. I've been thinking all night about what you said, she began over breakfast. You're absolutely right about everything. I was selfish, I was manipulative, and I handled this terribly. I continued eating my eggs, letting her talk. But people can change. I can change. What I did was wrong, but it doesn't have to define our entire future together. She sat down across from me with her own untouched plate. We've been together 8 years. We've built a life together. Doesn't that count for something? Shouldn't we at least try counseling before giving up completely? I looked up at her. You think this is about giving up? Isn't it? No. This is about recognizing incompatibility. Her face fell. We're not incompatible. We just had a rough patch. A rough patch is disagreeing about money or having different opinions about where to spend holidays. What you did reveals something fundamental about how you approach problems and how you view our partnership. One mistake doesn't define who I am. This wasn't one mistake. This was a series of calculated decisions. You felt attracted to someone else. Instead of discussing it with me, you researched polyamory as a solution. You presented it as being about our growth when it was really about your desires. When I participated genuinely, you tried to control and limit my involvement. When that failed, you attempted to manipulate me emotionally. And even now, you're trying to minimize what happened by calling it a mistake. She stared at her plate. So there's nothing I can do to fix this? You can start by acknowledging what actually happened instead of trying to reframe it. Fine. I wanted to have an affair, and I tried to trick you into allowing it. Is that what you want to hear? I want to hear the truth. But more importantly, I want to be with someone who doesn't need to be coached into telling it. The kitchen fell silent except for the sound of traffic outside. So what happens now? She asked quietly. Now I contact my lawyer and we figure out how to divide our assets fairly. Her head snapped up. You've already talked to a lawyer? I made some calls yesterday. Seemed prudent given the circumstances. You didn't even give me a chance to make this right. You had 8 years to build a foundation of trust and honesty. You chose to undermine that foundation the moment you wanted something I might not approve of. She started crying again. This is so unfair. People make mistakes in marriages all the time. You're right, they do. But most people don't dress up their mistakes as enlightened philosophy and try to manipulate their spouse into going along with them. I said I was sorry, and I heard you. But sorry doesn't change what this experience revealed about your character. She wiped her eyes. What about the accountant? Are you going to be with her now? I almost smiled at that. There is no romantic relationship with the accountant. There never was. What? We're colleagues who occasionally discuss work projects. The deep philosophical conversations about polyamory? I made most of that up. Her mouth fell open. You lied to me. I used your own strategy against you. I let you believe what you needed to believe to see how you'd react when faced with the reality of your own proposal. That's manipulative. Yes, it is. The difference is I was testing whether you actually believed the philosophy you were preaching. You were using philosophy to justify getting what you wanted while denying me the same. She sat there processing this information. The irony is, I continued, if you'd just been honest from the beginning about feeling attracted to someone else, we might have worked through it. Couples deal with attraction to other people all the time, but instead, you chose deception and manipulation. So this whole thing was just you proving a point? This whole thing was you revealing who you really are when you think you can get away with something. I finished my breakfast and stood up. The lawyer said we can handle this fairly quickly since we don't have kids and our finances are relatively simple. I'll be staying at a hotel for now while we sort out the details. Wait, she said, panic creeping into her voice. Can we at least talk about this more? Maybe take some time to think. I've thought about it plenty. The person I married wouldn't have done what you did, which means either you've changed or I never really knew you in the first place. Either way, I'm not interested in spending more years trying to figure out which one it is. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. Where are you going? To work. And then to start figuring out what my life looks like with someone who values honesty over manipulation. As I reached the door, she called out one last time. I hope you find what you're looking for. I paused and turned back. I already did. I found out exactly who I was married to. And now I'm going to find someone whose idea of problem solving doesn't involve trying to trick me into giving them what they want. The door closed behind me on 8 years of marriage and a lifetime of wondering what else she might have justified as being good for our relationship. Some lessons are expensive, but some prices are worth paying to maintain your self-respect.
Our story has come to an end. If you've made it this far, how about subscribing to our channel? It helps us immensely. I've selected 2 other videos for you that I'm sure you'll enjoy. Feel free to click on them. I'll be waiting for you in the next story. See you soon.